continue on with Chapter 2, Session 2 of the tutorial. And in this section, we are going to work with our fonts. Right now, we have a website that looks like this. We've done some formatting to our H1 and H2 headings to give the font a white color with a H1s have a dark orange background and the H2s have a lighter orange. We're going to work with the typography, so we're going to change the fonts that are used, the size of the fonts, and the size of the spacing for our letters. So this section starts on page 106 in your textbook. And our first tutorial box, those tan boxes, is on page 110. We are going to go to the TSS styles sheet, the CSS file, which I believe I have open in Text Wrangler. So I have it right here. So we have some HTML and some body formatting. Those are our background colors and the text color. And then we have some heading styles, the H1 and the H2 styles. The first thing that we need to do is make some changes to our aside or the block quotes. So we are going to say aside space block quote. So anything within the block quote tags that are directly related to the aside is going to get this formatting, and we're going to change the color. Remember, if we just use the color tag or the color attribute, we're actually changing the text color. So our color is going to be an RGB of 232, 165, 116. And if I save that and come back here and refresh, you'll see that my comments now are in that orange color. Okay, so we've got this about article, and we're going to make some changes here. So let's go back in, and under our heading styles, so we already have some formatting for the H1 and the H2 tags under our heading style heading. But we want to actually make some changes here. We want this to only apply to the H1 or the H2 that fall under the article with the ID of about_TSS. So I'm going to put my cursor right before H1, and I'm going to type article hashtag about_TSS. Remember, the hashtag signifies that it's an ID. So this is saying any article with the ID of about TSS. I'm going to look at that article. Any H1 within that article is going to get this formatting. And I'm going to do the same thing for the H2. So now if I save this and come back in and refresh my page, now I can see that it's just the article that has the background color on it. The aside and our navigation now have just the gray font instead of having the white font with the background. So it sets this article apart from the other pieces on our website. So this is looking pretty good for right now. I'm on page 113, and they're asking us to open a new file. So I'm going to come in here, and we need to open the TSS run txt HTML. So TSS run, and I'm going to open that in Text Wrangler. And actually, while I'm at it, I'm going to open the TSS bike txt HTML and the swim txt HTML. So we're going to open all 3 of those files. So we already have home open. Now we're going to open bike, run, and swim. And we need to link our CSS files. Well, I'm going to rename these first. So remember, I'm going to put my name, underscore. I'm going to get rid of that txt because we actually have, it's not just a text file anymore. We've actually made some changes to it. So I'm going to change all 3 of these. I'm going to resave them with my name on them. And then I'm going to go in and I am going to link the layout CSS file and that style CSS file that we created to each of these so that our websites look the same across, our web pages look the same across our website. Okay, so I've got those all saved. Now I'm going to go into my home, and just because I'm lazy, I'm going to copy and paste that link. So link href, the TSS layout CSS, it's a style sheet, and the TSS styles CSS, which should have your name on it. So I'm going to come in and put those in the head section of each of the websites that I just opened. And I'm going to make sure I save those as I go so that when I run them, I won't have a problem. Now, there's one thing we need to do that the book doesn't tell us to do. We've made changes to our file names. So I'm going to come back in here to my home page. And you will notice that this first 4 links in our navigation are for each of the pages. I'm going to come in and add my name to the beginning of those so that I'm actually opening the files that I saved. Otherwise, when you try to click through, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to give you, either tell you that the file's not available, or it will open a file that doesn't have all the CSS links to it. So I'm going to go into the navigation for each one of these and add my name to the beginning of each of those files. So I'm going to have to do that for all 4 pages. The home file is the only file that has a lot of links. The other 3 pages just have the links for the pages within that website. So it's just the home, run, bike, and swim pages. All right, so now I have those all linked. When I come in here and refresh, now if I go to the run page or the cycle page, it's opening my file, and I can see my file, my name up here in the file. So we're good to go so far, or at this point. Now, we are going to go into our styles. Remember, we're just working on CSS, so actually we shouldn't have to do anything else to these HTML files. Now that we've linked the CSS that we need, and we have made that change to all of the files that we're linking to in our navigation. Remember, it's only those 4 HTML files, the TSS Home, TSS Run, TSS Bike, and TSS Swim all need to have your name on them so that they match the file name that you have in your folder. So I'm going to go back into my styles, and we're going to actually be looking at the run page. So I'm going to come in before I do anything. I'm going to go to the running page. So we have this course outline that we're going to make some changes to. So we want to come into our heading styles of our CSS, and we're going to say article.syllabus H1. Now, if I use a dot, it's because it's a class. A hashtag means ID, a dot means class. And I'm going to actually put a comma, and then I'm going to say article.syllabus H2. And then I'm going to open and close my bracket. So what this is saying is that any article with the class of syllabus, any H1 is going to get this. But we're also going to apply it to any H2. And I must have a spelling mistake because this should have changed colors, I think. Well, let's keep going and see if it does. All right. So by putting the comma here, I can list out multiple pieces that I want to apply our formatting to. So I'm going to put a background color, dash color, and this is going to be an RGB, 255, 185, 255, and then color. And this one's an RGB of 101, 101, 101. All right, so we're going to change the background color and the text color on both the H1 and the H2 of any article that has a class syllabus. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to refresh my page, and now you can see that my two headings here both changed color. I'll actually go back in, and on my run page you can see that, let's just do 150. You can see that I have this article here that has a class syllabus, that the H1 is guided running and racing. Right here, guided running and racing. And if I scroll down a little bit, there's an H2 within that same article. I haven't closed the article tag yet. So that same article with a class syllabus has an H2, of course, outline, and that changed here. So we could simply just list those tags out and apply the same formatting. You can only do this if you're applying the same formatting. But you can list out as many tags as you need to here, just putting commas in between. Makes things a lot quicker when you're applying the same thing to multiple tags. So this one looks pretty good. Let's go, let's see, we're going to go back to our home page. So I'm going to click home and come back here, and we are actually going to change the font that is used on our page. So if I come in and I'm going to go under the body tag. So we've already, under HTML and body styles, we already have a body tag here with our color and our background. I'm going to use font family within those same brackets. Oops. And I'm going to list out the fonts that I want the system to use when displaying my page. So I'm going to list out 3 fonts. The first one is Verdana. That would be my first choice. But if for some reason it can't display Verdana, the computer doesn't have Verdana, whatever, then it's going to go to Geneva and then sans serif. You need to be careful when you're putting fonts in. Capitals make a difference. So if it's capitalized, you need to capitalize it. If it has quotes or single quotes around it, you need to use those. So pay careful attention when the book gives you fonts to use, that you type them the way that they give them to you. So I'm going to save this. And so here's my page before I refresh. And once I refresh it, you can see that we have changed fonts to something a little bit smoother. When we're working with fonts, we can just declare fonts like I've done here. These would be standardized fonts. We can also bring in specific fonts that we want to use. So I am going to go up to the top of my page under my character set. I'm going to hit a couple returns, and I'm going to use that @ symbol. and I'm going to say at font dash face, and then open my bracket. And I'm going to declare the font family name that I'm going to use for this, and this is Quicksand. And then the source. Now you're going to put the source twice. So you're going to URL Quicksand regular.woff, and that format is going to be WOFF. Don't put a semicolon. You're going to put a comma here because we're actually going to put two sources. We have two files that we're using. So we're going to have Quicksand regular.ttf. And the format of this is going to be true type. Now I'm going to put my semicolon. So if I put a semicolon at the end of a line, that ends my piece of code. So font family Quicksand, we ended that. The source is this or this. So we have two sources that can be used. So we want a comma here. We don't want the semicolon until we're done declaring our sources. And this is so that the system can use whichever font type that it needs, either the WOFF or the true type. All right? So we've brought this in, but we have not told the system to use it yet. I'm going to go down into my heading styles. And just like I did with this article .syllabus, I'm going to do H1, H2. So any H1 or H2 that does not already have formatting to contradict. So any H1 or H2 is going to get font family, and I'm going to do Quicksand. And then I'm going to declare the others as I did before. Oops. So Quicksand up here, I have it with a capital Q. So down here I'm going to put a capital Q, and then I'm going to list out the other fonts that I had previously chosen. It's going to try to use Quicksand first, but if for some reason my file can't be found or something, that's usually what's going to prevent it, is if the file isn't in the folder and the system can't pull it, then it's going to go to these stock fonts. So let's go to my website, and if I refresh, it should change my pages. You might be able to see it better on one of these that we haven't done anything to. Okay, so it doesn't look like it's using this, so I'm going to go back in, and I actually found that I have a typo here. And I'm hoping that once I fix that, let me just, now I'm hoping that when I come over here, there we go. Now it changed my font to that Quicksand that I just brought in. So it's really important, as I've just shown, to check your code after each piece, because it was just something simple as I missed an R in format and it stopped the system from being able to use this font that I was trying to bring in. So by stopping after each piece and making sure that things are working, then I avoided a whole bunch of problems later on. And you can see that as I go through the other pages, my H1 and H2 have that same font in use. All right, so we've changed the font. We've added some colors to font. Let's change the size of some fonts. So there are a couple of ways that we can change the font sizes. We're going to use the M's, just a sizing scale. So let's go into our heading styles, and I'm going to put a heading style for just the H1. I don't want to list these out again because I want H1 and H2 to be different. So I'm going to say font size, font dash size, and then 2.2 ems. And then for the H2, I'm going to say font dash size, and this is going to be 1.5 ems. So I want my H1s to be a little bit larger than H2s. And if I come in here and see if I can see both of them at the same time. And now my H1 is definitely much bigger and my H2 is smaller. So we're going to do something similar in our aside. We already have the block quote related to the aside. We just want the plain aside or anything in the aside. So we're going to say aside, and we are going to change the font size for my aside to 0.8 ems. So it's going to be much smaller than those H1 and H2 that I just put in. And I'm going to come down here into my navigation style, and I'm going to change the size of my nav at the same time. So it's going to be nav, and then my font size is going to be 0.8 ems in there also. So if I save that and come in and refresh, you can see that my links over here in my navigation are now smaller, and the text in my aside, these comments, are now smaller than the text over here in my article. So another thing that you can look at is the spacing of your letters. And let's go in and put it in. You'll see what I'm talking about. Go into the, let's see, where we had that H, under the heading styles, where we have that H1 and H2, where we declared our font family. We're going to say letter spacing. And again, this is measured in ems, so it's going to be 0.1 ems. So I'm going to save that and come over, and if I refresh, you can see how it kind of, you get a little bit of extra space between each of the letters in our H1 heading. That just makes it more substantial, especially something like this where you have such a short title. You might want to increase the spacing between the letters just so that it's not cramped and it's more substantial and kind of fills that line above there. Next thing, so that's letter spacing. Now we want to talk about the spacing of our lines. If you were working in Pages or Google Docs, a lot of times we will use the line spacing. We'll do our essays at 1.5 or 2 line spacing. That's giving us that extra space in between here. And you'll notice that our links here in our navigation kind of look like they're cramped together. So we're going to come over and go down to our navigation styles. And I'm going to say nav, and then a caret, and then UL. So the unordered list directly under the nav, I want to change the line height to 2 ems. And if I save that and come in, oops, and refresh, now I have nice spaces in between here. These are easy to read. They're easy to click on without worrying about clicking on something extra. So we've gone through quite a bit of tutorial 2. We've changed our font. We brought in a font and applied that to specific elements on our page. We've changed the font size, the letter spacing here, and the line height in our navigation. And you'll notice that if I go over to any of my other pages, that line height changed as well as the letter spacing for my H1, because by applying this to just the H1 or just the H2 in this style sheet that we have applied to all of our pages, we've linked it to all of them, then we have this cohesive website that we can scroll through, and it all looks like it belongs together, like it's part of the same page. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do here is we have our footer down here at the bottom that looks really crammed and just kind of stuck in there. It doesn't stand out at all. It just looks dumped in there. So let's go in and go under our footer styles. We are going to say body, caret, footer, address. So if I go into my home page, and let's go down to my footer, you'll see I have my footer here, but then I have information in between the address tags. So by using the body footer address, this is saying the address that's within the footer tag that's right in the body tag needs to get this formatting. And I'm going to add the background color, which is an RGB of 222, 128, 60. Oops. I'm going to change the text color to white, so I want to use the white, the color attribute. I'm going to put another color attribute here, which is an RGBA of 255, 255, 255, 0.7. So 255, 255, 255 is the red, green, and blue, the colors. And then 7 is how strong the color is. So it's the opacity, or how transparent it would be. So sometimes semi-transparent colors like this are not supported, so it's going to resort back to the white. But if the transparent or semi-transparent colors are supported, it will use this line instead of just the plain white. I'm going to add a font. Normal, small caps, bold, 0.9 M, 3 M. Oops. Quicksand, Verdana, oops, Geneva. Wow, typing's a problem today. Geneva, and then sans serif. And then my text align, whoops, text align is going to be center. All right, so I just put a whole bunch of information here. So look at this font right here. I didn't use font family, I didn't use font size, I just used font. And then I listed out a whole bunch of information. So I want a normal font. It's going to be in small caps. It's going to be bold. The 0.9 is the font size. The 3M is the line height. And then I have my my fonts that I've listed out. I don't need this on the next line. I could just do this and it will all do the same thing. It's just easier to read if I put it on the next line. And for me, I like to tab or space over so that it lines up with that first line, so that it shows that this is all one piece. Just make sure you put the semicolon after the end of that. Don't put the semicolon up here after the 3 M's. All right? So when you look through the text, it will tell you pieces that you can add together like this, instead of having to write out all of these pieces individually. Okay? So let's go ahead and save this. And come in, and I'm going to refresh my page. Whew. Now I have a nice dark background, My fonts are white. I'm using capital letters. Remember that small cap we used in that font tag? This is what it's doing. It's making these all capital letters, but the first letter that should typically be the capitalized letter is enlarged to show that it's the uppercase letter. And now we have finished section 2. So you should have the H1s for the article should be the only ones on that first home page. That should be the only thing that has the background on it now. Our H1s for the navigation and for the aside should not have the orange background on them. Everything should have a different font, including the H1 and H2 should be using that Quicksand font. H1 and H2 should be larger text, H2 being a little bit smaller than H1, but the aside and the navigation should definitely be smaller than those two. If I click through, I have H1s and H2s that are different sized fonts using that Quicksand font, and those should be the same throughout my page. The only difference is on the running, cycling, and swimming pages, they have a purple background, whereas on the home page, they have the orange background. And we also have a footer that has a background color. Its text is white. We're using small caps. We've changed the font. We've changed the size. By changing the line height, it gave us a little bit of space above and below the text within our footer. And if your page looks like this, you will be ready to move on to session 3, where we will talk more about pseudo elements and classes.